Hello everyone, I'm coming to you from Cranbrook, from Kingswood School for Girls is the historic name, from Kingswood, or Cranbrook Kingswood Upper School. Kingswood campus is our modern name. I'm your curator, Kevin Adkison, and it is snowing here. And like Mark Twain said, if you don't like the weather, wait a few minutes. It has been snowing off and on all day. Today's tour, we're going to be touring through the exterior architecture and ornament of Kingswood School for Girls. And this campus was designed by the late, great Eliel Saarinen from about 1920, conceived in about 1928. Construction broke ground on October 1st, 1930, and the girls started school on September 26th, 1931. So it took only 11 months to build this whole campus. And we'll get started with our tour while more and more people join us, looking at the gates to Kingswood. So the school, when it opened, was not connected to the rest of campus. This is, about a half mile from the academy and the boys' school, all on the same 319 acres. But Kingswood was a little bit more isolated, so you could come off of Cranbrook Road here, and then you would come in through these magnificent gates. And with these really incredible Mankato limestone features here, these entrance posts at the gate, we see the start of a design motif that will continue all throughout Cranbrook. So the School for Boys is sort of Gothic, English arts and crafts. Kingswood is something different. Kingswood is much more modern, and Saarinen will derive much of the school's design from this stepped pyramid form, or the ziggurat form, where you have one feature telescoping into the next. These gates were designed by Eliel Saarinen as well, and recently restored. And so you would come in past the gatehouse, the lodge, which is now faculty housing, and then you can see up the hill, past the daffodils, on up to the main Kingswood campus. Now, Kingswood today is one half of the high school, and so this is where the girls that are boarding students live, but it's where girls and guys go to class every day at the upper school. Now, Kingswood, the name, it came from George Booth, our founder. His paternal great-great-grandmother, Elizabeth Kingswood Booth. And Elizabeth Kingswood was born in Cranbrook, Kent County, England, on August 17th, 1749. So she was born in the ancestral Kingswood. Now, I won't get close because I assume that they are still home, but these are examples of the faculty apartments. So some of the instructors live there. And then we head past, and it's a crazy day for a tour, but my goodness, it is gorgeous out here. And Saarinen will remember from our last tours, he was a painter first. But by the time he comes to America, he's known really for his architecture, for his signature designs, but then also for his city planning. And he plans Kingswood like this little monolithic village where everything is one building, everything is self-contained, but like a village, everything you need to exist here is in the building. And he plans it just like his cities, where he concentrates the density at the center, and then it becomes less dense towards the periphery. And so the building, as conceived by George Booth imagined that there would be a sort of large rectangular school around two courtyards here. And his son Henry Booth drew up plans for the first Kingswood. That was two sections, a sort of public and private section. Saarinen divides it now into three sections. So our first section is here, where you have the ballroom, what we call heaven, on the top floor. This is the dining room for the girls, with the chimney here marking the great, it's actually marking the boiler room. There is no fireplace, but it signifies dining here. On the other side is the auditorium, and then down below was the little gym, the rec room, as well. The classrooms are on this side, and then we turn again, and the dormitories are at the back. And this serves sort of multiple functions, because he not only gives the public the most sort of monumental and largest place, but he also gives the girls the south-facing private room, so they're going to be warmer, they're in more sun, but they also look at the lake as well. And Saarinen brings the public in through these doors here. And so we have these incredible monumental limestone columns that lead to this door that slips you into the lobby. And we'll go ahead and look into the lobby. Now, I can't take you into the schools. I'm still working on how that might work, and also respecting the governor's stay-at-home orders. But we'll look in through the window here to the main lobby, inside the very large stained glass window that we saw outside. And then you see the hallway running down. All of Kingswood is one single loaded corridor, so a double loaded corridor has rooms on both sides. Saarinen only ever gives us rooms on one side, so that every hallway as you move through Kingswood has windows on one side. Here you can see the Rose lobby, though it's missing its Rose furniture and its Rose rug, so there's not much Rose left. But above the Rose lobby is the faculty dining room, which you can see there, with those great aluminum leaf light fixtures. Now, maybe I'll post later this week or later today images of what the dining hall looks like, because I'm not sure that my camera view is going to do it at all justice. But if we look into the dining room, we can see some of the original furnishings there. But as I mentioned on our post, we're looking at the outside of Kingswood today. And so thinking about the materials, the main formal material is this Mankato Kasota limestone, which comes from Minnesota. It's the same limestone that Saarinen used at the Art Museum 11 years later. And it is very, very porous, and it's also very golden. And so the porosity you can see in moments where that might have been someone clipping it. But the stone itself is just very susceptible to degradation. And you might look at that and think, why would you ever use this stone? But Saarinen was using it for this feature. He liked the way that it decayed and sort of was weathered by water and snow. And I see some of my Yale friends watching. This is the same Mankato golden limestone that James Gamble Rogers used in all of Yale's Neo-Georgian buildings from the exact same year. Many of those buildings are 1931. What I think the main reason that Saarinen used this Mankato limestone, though, was for its golden color, so that even on a very cold April day like today, when the sun is in the clouds, the building has this sort of warmth to it, and the building is sort of giving us this lovely glow. And when you live in a state like Michigan with 18 months of winter, you want that sort of warmth to come from the architecture. Now, these stone columns are also entirely self-supporting. So 1930, same as today, the more common way to have these constructed would be to build a concrete column with a steel beam in the center and then wrap it in stone. You save a lot of money by using less stone, by using what we call face stone. But you also make sequencing, how you build the building, it's much easier because the concrete structure, you pour it, and then much later, right before the building opens, you would just clad this column. Saarinen does not do that, though. He uses solid blocks of Mankato limestone. You can see here 1 block, 2 block, 3 block, 4 block, 5, 6 blocks going up. It is solid blocks of stone, and they are supporting the concrete roof above. So sequencing becomes very difficult because you have to have the shop drawings done, you have to have the stone yard cut the stones, you have to have the masons rough them out, and then only after that can you actually pour the structure of the building. And while we're looking at the stone columns, the brick walls are also load-bearing. So this is not a steel frame structure that then is wrapped in brick. This is a brick load-bearing wall that is actually supporting the roof and the structure. And to form the concrete, there's a concrete yard down in the valley, and every day the Norwegian foremen who built the campus and all the Norwegian supervisors would drive the Model A's up Cranbrook Road, and then there were actually 3 levels of scaffolding constructed, and the Model A's would back up ramps and then pour their concrete onto that roof plane and then drive off the building and drive down the scaffolding. It's a pretty amazing way of building the building. Here we can see the leaded glass windows, where remember that telescoping our stepped pyramid motif that we saw on the gateway here repeats in the leaded glass window. And you'll see even with the copper frame, another sort of formal geometric shape with stepped pyramids. There's also moments of asymmetry, like this bump out here, where you see the brickwork has that same stepped motif. And what I love about this, the green brick coursing, are these corner bricks that are just this amazing hunk of material. The bricks were made in Ohio. They're called Cranbrook brick, named for their use here at Kingswood. If you're local and you go shopping at Somerset Mall, they use the exact same bricks for the Somerset North and recladding Somerset South. Now, as we turn up to what would be the daily entrance, the classroom entrance, we notice how much lower and horizontal the building is. Saarinen wanted the building to be have three pertinent ideas come through. This is what he told reporters of the Architectural Digest in 1941. He wanted, number one, for his project to be feminine and useful, and youthful. Number two, he wanted it to be a definite period of architecture, but none that had ever come before and none that would ever be used again. And for him, that meant it would be American architecture, which you can debatably say that the boys' school architecture and the Art Academy architecture is not American. It's very much European. It's very much revival. Here it is American architecture. And the third principle of Saarinen's design here was that he wanted it to be one with the landscape. And so we can see how these low horizontals would fit within this sort of Michigan, the beginning of the prairie. And then you also see how the hipped roofs just mirror the low hills that it's built into. And the entire north facade of the building is up against Angley Wood, which is the only old growth stand of trees at Cranbrook. This was part of George Booth's initial purchase of 180 acres in 1904. These were the only trees that were on the property in 1904. And so Booth and Saarinen wanted to keep these trees. And one thing Saarinen did was he sent out his contractors to measure every tree that was over 3 inches, and then he designed the building to fit between them. So the woods ended there, and this was a farm group number 1. Torn down to build Kingswood School. And then he builds this retaining wall to allow the car turnaround, which, you know, the boys' school does not have a car turnaround. So in just a few years, the auto became the primary way of thinking about how the girls would get in and out of school. And they're sort of buffered by the wood on the north. Now, as we look up through the entrance portiere, notice how the walls are stepping in. So we have that same telescoping or ziggurat form. We also have the ziggurat form in the colored concrete pavers. These are correct reproductions. We have more ziggurats in these light fixtures. There's over 160,000 pounds of copper used in the building, from copper light fixtures to copper switch covers to the copper roofs and soffits. Whew. Now we come into this covered area here, and notice that we have a different variation of the stone columns. So on that end of the school, we saw how they were tapered and they had the little botanic growths, but they were more sort of clear telescoping patterns. Here we have this more almost like wheat stalk column. So it's a variation on a design idea. And Saarinen is indebted to the domestic architecture of Frank Lloyd Wright. Now, Frank Lloyd Wright at this moment, 1931, was a has-been. The same year that Kingswood opened, Philip Johnson introduced Frank Lloyd Wright at the Museum of Modern Art as America's greatest 19th century architect. Frank Lloyd Wright would shoot back when he got to the podium and say, "I am not the greatest 19th century American architect, I'm the greatest architect of any place, of any time." But in 1931, he was really shooting falsehoods because he hadn't built a major building in almost 20 years. He was really a dated 19th century architect. Now, with Falling Water, the Johnson Wax, and Herbert Jacobs' house, Frank Lloyd Wright would come back in 1936 and take up his mantle as most famous American architect, or most famous architect of any place. But when Eliel Saarinen knows Frank Lloyd Wright in these Chicago years of 1924 to 25, and then here at Cranbrook when Wright would visit, Saarinen is looking back to buildings that were essentially 20 years old for inspiration. So he was looking at Frank Lloyd Wright's buildings in Chicago of the 1890s and 1900s. Think of the Roby House of 1909. And Eliel Saarinen is expanding Frank Lloyd Wright's vocabulary out of the sort of idiosyncrasies of Frank Lloyd Wright's architecture. Frank Lloyd Wright's so personal, so maniacal. But he's also liberating himself from Frank Lloyd Wright's kind of dictate of every material must be ornamented the same way. If you look at the way Frank Lloyd Wright designs ornament, particularly at the Imperial Hotel of the 19-teens, it is very difficult to see where brick and stone and carpet, where they change. Saarinen found it all a little bit fussy, and so here at Kingswood, he acknowledges that he is inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright, but then he attempts to sort of perfect Frank Lloyd Wright's system of design and decoration. And so you have this clarity of the stone column, of the shaft, and you have variations on a theme, so variations on ways of telescoping up, variations on what you're inspired by. I love these sort of weak shaft columns with these details carved down, looking at these ridges in between the Mankato limestone. And then my very favorite detail of this part of the building are these brick walls here. I call these the Wizard of Oz windows because this is the dean of the girls' school office. So he or she could open that window and yell at late students. But I also love how Saarinen uses a sort of logic to this design. You have one brick at the center, pushed one brick deep into the wall. You have two bricks here, pushed half a brick deep. And then here you have three bricks at the top, and they are flush with the wall. And so you can see as we look down the side how it's pushed one in, halfway in, and then flush with the wall. And then you have the Mankato limestone bench, which recalls the raya rug, the bench rayas at Saarinen House, where the fabric comes from the wall over the seat and onto the floor. So you see this intersection of tapestry and weaving in the architecture. Now the bench here has this very subtle curve to it, and it gives it that real pillowy softness for a limestone bench. The paving stones around the ground here have this sort of radial moving out with these little keys that reverse, and then they spin all the way around. And then if we look at the Great Seal of Kingswood, which was added in 1951, enter to learn, go forth to serve, and it's sitting beneath the concrete roof where you see again that radial movement of the keys spinning around with the really horrible light bulbs at the center. And of course the light fixtures themselves are telescoping up into the roof. Saarinen designs these buildings as total works of art. So he designs the logo, he designs the plates, the silverware, he designs the centerpieces, the light fixtures, the furniture, the carpets, the architecture, the pavers. the uniforms. He designs it all, but he wasn't working alone. He was working with his wife Loya and her weavers at Studio Loya Saarinen. He was also working with his son Eero, who designed 39 pieces of furniture for the school. He was 19 years old and 20 when he was designing this. And then he was working with his daughter Pipsan, who was the colorist and chose the soft teals and turquoise blues and roses. Now, if we take a peek into the green lobby here, the original rugs are being destroyed, and actually the headmaster of the school in 1934 complained about the tourist coming through the school destroying the rugs. So now we have reproductions, but they only come out on special occasions. And I'll post photos to Facebook showing some of these interior spaces, those green tiles all made at Pewabic Pottery. Now, I love ornament too. Those of you who don't know me as well, I studied ornament for 3 years of undergrad at Yale with the ornament professor. And so my family has been hearing me learn about ornament and talk about ornament for a decade now. If you notice, the pathway as we move through into this private courtyard has telescoped, and it's sort of expanded, narrow, all the way to the door, where you have Carl Millis's sculpture resting on its own telescoping pediment. And then you have the chimney behind, and the chimney is asymmetrically placed. So Saarinen never gives us true symmetry at Cranbrook. It's always about making and breaking these sort of symmetrical vistas. Again, interesting colored concrete pavers all around the courtyard that have this great radial symmetry. And then if we look at just one little niche over here, if you remember last week, we saw Loya Saarinen's Tree of Life tapestry at Saarinen House. And look at how brick is used here almost like a tapestry. It's dividing these two rooms. It's over this great brick base. And then it has this sort of irregular three-part division, narrower side parts, and then the center. And it reads like one of Loya's tapestries. And if we get close to this brick, supervised by Norwegian bricklayers with Americans doing much of the labor. And you see how it is flush, very narrow mortar lines between the bricks, and they're flush with the wall. But then if we come to the main building's bricks, which we can use these down here, do you see how the mortar line is now horizontally gouged out? So the vertical mortar lines are flush, and the horizontal are then incised. And that is so that when you see the building from afar, you'll get shadow lines of this horizontal, and it will encourage the view of Kingswood as being this great horizontal building that's set low in the landscape. And so it's this alternating way of laying bricks where some are flush and make very smooth surfaces, and then some are horizontal and encourage that horizontal line. And then as we move about, again, all of the roofs are made of copper. This is new copper, the original copper. Saarinen had all of the workmen pee in big barrels, and then they would take the urine to the roof and use mops and splosh it all over the roof, so that on day one, when the school opened, the roofs were beautiful and green. The new copper roof put on about 15 years ago is supposed to turn green. It is still copper, but it's treated with something to try and have the copper last longer, and that is preventing it from turning green. You are starting to see green moments, though, and that will be great because Saarinen clearly never wanted the roof to be this brown color. Elsewhere, we can see moments of the brick interacting with the leaded window. So do you see how this window is the same dimension as the brick here, moving all the way across with that deep, deep cut of mortar between the horizontal courses. And then here, where Saarinen is creating design with the brick, the mortar is pulled back flush, and these wide openings are pushed in so that you have this rhythm going from the leaded window to the brickwork and then to the side with the light fixture lined up perfectly, and then the green painted or oxidized bricks there. This is the fabulous Kingswood weaving workshop, where there are about 65 looms Maycombers and Cranbrook looms, where the students work on weaving and fashion projects. Those are the Maycombers. These are the Cranbrook looms over here, a little bit more difficult, and so these are used by the advanced students. And you'll see that it's all looms as far as the eye can see. And we still do have a very strong weaving program here at Cranbrook in both the high school and the art academy. Now, moving up, we see another chimney. One interesting thing about the construction of the building, not only is all the stone columns structural, but all the brick walls are load-bearing, and the gutter of the roof, do you see the little line there? That is the gutter, and that is actually what is holding in the concrete ceiling tray. So the copper gutter is the edge of the concrete floor plate behind it. It's a bizarre way to sequence and build a building, but it's not going anywhere, I will tell you that. These buildings are built for the ages. If anyone has any questions, you can type them in. I try to notice the questions. It's a little hard to talk, walk, and hold the camera. So we're going to move around to the other side of the building. We'll take a look back over to the main sort of public entrance with the fourth or sixth floor ballroom, depending on where you're counting from, this side or the back side. Now, the ballroom did not meet fire code in 1931, so it was rarely used. And in 1940, Eliel Saarinen redesigned the top floor as for small apartments. They still don't meet fire code, and so now it's nothing is up in heaven. As we turn the corner and walk around the school, we'll see why it is called Kingswood by a lake, because Saarinen sandwiches the school in between the hillside in Englewood and the lake, Kingswood Lake on the other side. One interesting thing about the school, and especially interesting as we are here in our own sort of quarantine, was that when the school was under construction, the administrators the contractors were struggling to finish the building. Things like the hand-woven rugs took 2 more years after they opened to get those done. But the contractors were just struggling can we open this building on time? And so during the summer of 1931, the headmistress decided, I will open my new school building a week late. And it was, the records of the foundation. It's just all this hoopla about, can we open on time? Can we open on time? They decide to push it back to September 21st, 1931. So they would be a week later than the other Michigan schools. What happened in early September of 31, though, was a polio outbreak in Michigan. And so the governor actually closed all Michigan schools and said no Michigan schools can open until September 21st, 1931. So Kingswood ended up opening a week late for construction, but it was also opening the same time as every other Michigan school that year. How long did it take to build? It took from October 1st, 1930 until September 21st, 1931. 1 year. When they opened, there were 25 boarding school students and 53 day students. So about 75 girls went to the school. Now, it is pretty much the same size today with 800 students. So those students were living large. They had lots of space. And by 1933, the Great Depression was taking a toll on this huge building, and most of the building was closed for the 1933, 34, and 35 school years, and they used a tiny fraction of the entire facility. The headmaster actually left because she did not know how she was supposed to run a school of this magnitude and beauty on the budget she had been given. And so it is overbuilt, and it's also was much larger than needed in the earliest years. We are having every season on this tour. I wanted to bring you to the other side of that courtyard we were just on. So again, the building is only ever 1 room wide. So it's this study hall here, the hallway, and then the courtyard. And we see more unique leaded glass windows here, looking into the original west lobby, which now, if you can look down, you can see how the building is really very narrow. And again, I'll try and post some pictures on our Facebook showing some of these rooms, both historically and today. There are lots of terraces. So Saarinen designed the school for boys around a series of courtyards and quadrangles in the English model, but he designs Kingswood along a series of terraces. And so these terraces have lots of architectural detail in the Mankato stone and in the brickwork. Yes. How long did it take to build? Is there a strange fire escape from the window of heaven? No, the fire escape is off, which is why we don't use it at all. I'll try to post a photo of the gutter in the concrete because it is a crazy construction detail, but it is a little hard to understand. And then, Yale's president, Benno Schmidt, was fired, or essentially lost the presidency in 1991 when he told the Wall Street Journal it would take $1 billion to restore Yale's buildings. And 20 years later, Yale had spent $4 billion and still was on renovations. Cranbrook is, much the same way, where there you could restore these buildings every year, and there's still more to do. So we're lucky to have Eliel Saarinen's structure of building, and the level of construction initially allows us to use these buildings without really major work. This is the study hall window that to me reads like a tapestry. So this is not a door, this is just a window with this great grid of leaded glass. And then down below was the original girls' middle school, and up above more study halls, again all load-bearing buildings. Why is it called heaven? Because it was on top of this enormous building, and you could see out from all four sides, and you could see across the entire campus. So Cranbrook House is through that wood, the Art Museum is through that wood, and the Institute of Science is over there. The girls' middle school is just there. Now this is a 1962 edition, and we will block it out of our tour. It was really not a great work of architecture, and it kills Saarinen's terrace. But I wanted to walk us around to be able to see this wonderful chimney with this huge stack of bricks going up, and the way that the bricks are telescoping in here and then turned on their side into this great X shape with all of the mortar and molding and turning the bricks. I did neglect to say what inspired the founding of the girls' school. I think if it had been up to George Booth, he would have held off much later than 1931 to open a school for girls. The school for boys was draining financially. The Art Academy was fledgling, and the Great Depression was raging. But there were already girl high school students at Brookside. And so in 1927, when the boys' school opened, the Brookside students, the boys could keep going to Cranbrook. The girls had to go somewhere else. 6 of them stayed on and formed the initial classes of Kingswood School for Girls, but they didn't have their own building. And so Ellen Booth went to the girls and she told them, if you can wait a little longer, I will make sure you have a school that is both nicer and more beautiful than the boys' school. And so Ellen really, it was her money that built Cranbrook, and it was her money, especially here at Kingswood. George Booth was involved in the construction. He came to the building site every Tuesday. He knew every construction worker by name. He was very conscious of the time and expense. He was also very respectful of the craftsmen, and so he had to balance this desire to have the most well-built and beautiful school with also bringing it in on budget during the Great Depression. Ellen told her granddaughter, I will have you a school, and she did. In 1931, her granddaughter was able to start going to school here. The building itself, we're now on the opposite side, so you can see heaven there, and you can see how it's gone from being 4 floors up to now 6 floors above. And then this is the girls' dormitory stretching out here. Looking into the Japanese garden is in that little tree group there. And then you have Carl Millis's dancers there alongside Kingswood Lake. And then we turn around, we block out the gymnasium addition, and we see Saarinen's great study hall. And I mentioned that George Booth was insistent on construction. They actually rebuilt this window 3 times in the course of construction because Booth and Saarinen could not agree on what the best way of constructing this subtle curve was. And so they just kept tearing this entire wall down and rebuilding it until they had gotten this great ship prow coming off the front. This room was originally the library, converted in 1980 to a study hall. And then as we come up the steps, and then, the gym serves a purpose. It's the same architect who built the gym off of Brookside in the 60s, but here is 1961, here is 1931, and I think you can see just the level of excruciating detail that Saarinen went to in all of his brickwork and design. When the gym was done, we also lost the decorative paving, so imagine that Saarinen had much more ornamental pavings. And this was the tea terrace. So in the afternoon, this is where the girls would come and they would have tea served out here. The boys' school silverware that Eliel Saarinen selected, it has, I think, about 5 flatware pieces and maybe 6 or 7 different dishes. The girls have something like 40 different flatware pieces, as well as another 30 different dishes to use. So gender roles were quite strong, even with the dining. And the boys did not have afternoon tea, but the girls did. This is Marshall Fredericks. Marshall Fredericks sculpted this as mother and child. The donor who gave it to Cranbrook went here with her sister, and so we call it Two Sisters. The original is mother and child, but it's Two Sisters here. And then we're looking back. So where we were in the courtyard is just the other side of this chimney. Again, a very narrow building. And you see how Saarinen goes from these flat stretches of plate glass windows to then leaded glass windows where it's either an opening or a significant sort of event. Here another series of brick and glass that's reading almost like a tapestry. Yes, so the classes they get, I didn't know that they had moved around, but all of the class years, those are every class year of Kingswood girls. And they start being carved in wood paneling, then they move to carved in different wood paneling, and now there are these plaques on the outside. And then I love these curious iron pieces that Saarinen designs. We don't have any sculptures at Cranbrook by Eliel Saarinen, but he was interested in sculpture, and he does do decorative ironwork. I mean, what is this? Who knows? It's figural, it's evocative. Is that a bird, perhaps? Is this another sort of mother and child figure with the larger shape and the smaller? What's this little cloud down here? And then one thing that's interesting is all the hallways are duplicated with exterior communications. So the girls could go from the study hall here, and this is that great window that we were just looking at below with the incorrect furniture. I don't see, that is Eero Saarinen furniture there for the dormitories, used in the wrong place here. The furniture does actually survive for most of these rooms, so hopefully we'll be able to get some interest in weaving more reproduction rugs and restoring the original furniture, because it survives, but it's just not there. And then you could leave from the study hall into the green lobby outdoors, and then of course there's the classrooms here, and then another hallway on the other side. How is everyone doing? I can't see the time. I don't know what time it is. Anyone have other questions? We're gonna walk to one other little spot. I will not walk around to the other side of the girls' dorm, because to do that, you have to cross the River Rouge and march all the way through the Japanese garden, over the Red Bridge, and to the other side of the campus, where there's the mysterious Echo Court off the nurse's office. So we'll just end over here. Thank you, Haley. And so we'll end. It is truly a whole nother season from the start of our tour in the snow. This magnolia is coming out. And one thing Saarinen does is he not only makes the building very thin and sort of endless terraces and these legs reaching out to the landscape, but he also gives us a lot of opportunities to get into the landscape. Now, of course, a lot of these today are locked, but he imagined that the school would be sort of one continuous piece with the nature outside. And so we come up these stairs, which have the typical Saarinen detail that he uses after about 1930, where you have the curved bull nose to then the right angle at the corner, and then you bring up to these magnificent Mankato limestone columns. And this is one single block of limestone. And then it comes up to this almost Egyptian sort of, the Greek temple at Knossos has very similar columns, so ancient Greek, alluding to different histories, but itself not ripped directly from some historic style. And that is Saarinen's great genius, is the ability to look at all different aspects of history and pull from them to make something entirely new. And now we can see down the length of the girls' dormitories, the girls' study halls, more dormitories below, and then these magnificent columns, the concrete roof, which has pressed in designs, which we'll see again at the Art Museum of 1942. This is all 1931. Heaven up there, where you could see all the way across the 300 acres of the campus, and then the auditorium through here. And lest you thought these were just chairs, these are Cranbrook design chairs, the 440 chairs, by one of our Academy alumni. So thanks so much for joining me on this whirlwind of a snow globe of a tour. I hope that you all enjoyed. It is remarkable that we are able to use these buildings. It is sad that around the world we're not able to use them right now, but I think that the generosities of the booths to build this, the people who have maintained it over the years, the parents who are still supporting us by sending their children here, it really is a remarkable work of architecture, but even more than that, is a remarkable sort of capsule for education to still be going on. I always say that when I work here, I love being the curator of these buildings because I'm not just curating and running these as museum pieces. These are real working buildings. And so when I see things that aren't historically accurate, it bothers me on that level, but it doesn't bother me because we're still using these. These are classrooms, these are teachings. And I think you see in the students like Lisa Frank, who graduated from this building in the early 70s, you see the impact. Even if the students don't quite know it yet, if the students don't necessarily see that there are 10,000 repetitions of telescoping forms, I think it does stick with you later on to have been educated in a place like this. So thanks for joining me. I'm going to head home and try and see what other seasons we have left today. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Be safe, stay home. Be well, and I'll see you next Wednesday for our Live at 5.